to week 11. This week's tutorial is about how to get to know a book without doing much reading. And I'm sure a lot of you will appreciate this. So here I have a book that we're not reading for this semester, just so that we don't copy me. So I won't be using an example that we're using for the 4 texts. This one is called The House on Mango Street. I have never read this book before, just for a disclaimer. And this is by Sandra Cisneros. Okay. The first aspect, or the first step to really getting to know a book is kind of going over the cover, taking a look at that. You have a apartment building. So it does say the house on Mango Street, but this is a pretty large building for a house, unless this person is rich. And so then we're going to look into the table of contents. Some books might have some just chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. However, this book does have names for each chapter. So that kind of gives us a little bit of context, a little bit of a clue as to what the book might be about. So here we start with Hares, Boys and Girls, My Name, Kathy, Queen of Cats, Our Good Day, Laughter, and so on and so forth. And just kind of taking a look at this, the table of contents goes a little further. There was an old woman. She had so many children she didn't know what to do. Alicia, who sees mice? That's interesting. The family of little feet, a rice sandwich, chanclas, hips, the first job, Papa who wakes up tired in the dark. Keeps going. No speak English. Rafaela who drinks coconut and papaya juice on Tuesdays. Sally. Minerva writes poems. Bums in the attic. Oh, that's interesting. The Monkey Garden, Red Clown. So these are kind of things that, like an inside joke for the book, or maybe an inside scoop, if you will. If you read the book, then you'll find out what that means. Linoleum Roses, The Three Sisters, Alicia and I talking on Edna's steps, A House of My Own, Mango Says Goodbye Sometimes, and then a note about the author. So that's kind of giving us a little tiny bit of context. Obviously, some of these things we might not understand until we actually get into the book. But, of course, going over the table of contents, it seems like, obviously, this is somebody who's of the Latinx or Hispanic, or of a Hispanic Latinx background. So, chanclas, and names like Geraldo, no speak English, Rafaela, Minerva. Those are kind of things that have names and words that are part of the Latinx or Hispanic background. Then we can also take a look at what the introduction might be. So it's been 10 years since The House on Mango Street was first published. This is kind of about the author. When I began The House on Mango Street, I thought I was writing a memoir, but by the time I finished, my memoir was no longer a memoir, no longer autobiographical. It had evolved into a collective story peopled with several lines from my past and present, placed in one fictional time and neighborhood, Mango Street. So that's interesting. The voice of Mango Street in all my work was born at one moment. I can say my political consciousness began the moment I recognized my otherness. So this is definitely about someone who is understanding their Latinx or Hispanic background as a result of where they live. So Mango Street seems to be a very significant part, especially because it is the title. So we can assume that from that kind of context, this is somebody who's talking about their upbringing, and especially if they become aware of political divides and their otherness, this definitely has a lot of tones that lean towards maybe poverty level, or here we have the ugliest subjects. So really hard conversations might be had in this book that have to do with being a working class person and a person of, here we go, American of Mexican descent. So that might be what that story is about. Especially when we're talking about otherness, we really have to focus on this idea that this person really experienced a lot of different things that made them feel like they were an other in a society. Okay? Now, Another great way to get to know our book is to have a list of vocabulary. Now, all of our vocabulary words I looked up through a website, and they had a little list of about 40 words. Obviously, we don't go past around 10 for our units, so I gave everybody a list of 8, and I gave myself a list of 8, and again, I've never read this book, so I just got it off the website. So we have jet, anemic, scarcely, inherit, authority, temporary, responsibility, and threshold. So because I already kind of am a walking dictionary, as you guys know, jet might be a bit of a way to walk. Anemic is either the identity of a eating disorder, or it can also be used as sort of an adjective and not with the connotation of the eating disorder, but rather it just means someone who looks a little bit sickly. So scarcely, this can have to do with that poverty level or maybe just that otherness aspect. So scarcely meaning there's not a lot of availability of something. Okay. Inherit, this is something that is passed down through generations or kind of just given to someone. Okay. It can be an item, it can be ideas, it can be clothing, that kind of thing. Like hand-me-downs. Think of it like that. Authority. Authority and inherit and scarcely kind of have to do with the same thing. So authority, I'm thinking in terms of what the context of this book is kind of giving me right now, because obviously I haven't read it, but authority is giving me this sense that they have this otherness, right, that they talked about, and it's scarcely, there's something that's scarce, something that's not always there. An authority figure in this book might be the reason why something is scarce in their environment. So this authority figure, this is somebody who has a higher power or a higher status in society or in their home life, maybe within their school or whatever place they might be at in this book, what kind of setting they're dealing with. Temporary. Temporary means something that is not always there. It might be there for a short while and then gone the next. Responsibility. Responsibility has to do with maybe it's a job or a sense of high importance with an item or an idea, and you are in charge of distributing it, taking care of it. Threshold, that is something that can be either physical or an idea. In the physical aspect, a threshold might be something to hold you on top of. So that can be a floor. A floor is the threshold, or the first step of a staircase is the threshold. It holds you to get to the next spot. A threshold in the idea would be kind of talking about this authority. So you have someone that starts at the bottom of maybe a work environment. So you start off as a cashier at a store, and your threshold to going to being a manager position is making sure that you stay at that store for a couple of years or longer than the other employees that have worked there, and you work your way up from that threshold. Okay? So these are vocabulary words, and like I said, obviously some of you guys might have to really research what they mean in different contexts, as well as how they are applied to the book. So in my idea here, as I've defined each word on my own without kind of researching them, I can assume that this book has a lot to do with kind of growing up in a harsh environment and growing up around maybe a young age, because this is someone who's inheriting something, who's dealing with an authority figure. Things are temporary, they have a sense of responsibility. So this is giving me that this story is about a young person working or living in this environment, which is known as Mango Street. And maybe it's just kind of talking about growing up. And so, aside from getting to know the table of contents and maybe the introduction and a little bit about our background vocabulary, A really great way to also get to know your book is looking up a crash course or maybe a summary of the book. So we're going to look up The House on Mango Street summary. Now, SparkNotes is really popular. We can do SparkNotes, EndNotes, Cliff Notes, or whatever website you end up finding. So I'm just going to click SparkNotes because I'm familiar with that. We have a plot overview, we have a summary of the entire book, or you can get summaries of each chapter. You can go through each of the characters, what their significance is. You can go through main ideas, themes, motifs, symbols, and key facts, some major quotes that are involved in the book, and further study. Sometimes SparkNotes offers little quizzes. So if you really want to make sure that you're absorbing all the information, that's an optional thing for you guys. I'm not going to quiz you on the book, but your main test, if you will, is going to be how you're researching the background information for this book. So, just some significant things that I wanted to do here was taking notes. So let's just say that I actually typed the definition of each of these words. And then my notes are going to be, this is maybe a young person. Okay. Now I'm going to take a look at SparkNotes to really certify that this story is about a young person. So, character list. The main character is Esperanza, the novel's heroine and narrator, approximately 12 years old Chicana, budding writer who wishes to have a home of her own. The House on Mango Street chronicles a year of her life as she matures maturely and sexually. Very interesting. The name Esperanza means hope in Spanish. Yeah, that's true. Then she has best friends by named Rachel and Lucy. Sally is a young girl that she befriends the same year that she moves to Mango Street. Okay, so this book is about a young person named Esperanza. She moved into a place called Mango Street. You guys can handwrite this or you can type it. I'm just doing this so that visually and virtually you guys kind of get what I'm doing here. And just some significant aspects is that she feels this otherness. That really stuck out to me here. She is Latinx, Chicana, as mentioned there. And it's talking about her kind of getting responsibilities, being more mature. So she is 12. So they haven't even reached the teenage years, but she's 12 years old. Okay. So some main ideas, I want to go through the themes here. The power of language, no speak English. Yeah, that's true. That sounds interesting. The struggle of self-definition, that is absolutely something to do with being 12 years old. So, self-definition. Sexuality versus autonomy. This is something we kind of discussed during our Women in Poetry themes that we were talking about. So her goals are clear. She wants to escape her neighborhood and live in a house of her own. The desire to escape and the desire for men don't seem mutually exclusive, but Esperanza observes other women in the neighborhood and the marriages that bind them. She begins to doubt that she can pursue both. So she's kind of seeing the cultural divide between family, otherwise known as marriage, and having a home or buying a home. Now, these notes are only made for you to understand, so obviously these are written in such a way that you guys might not really understand. But so here, Esperanza decides she'll combine sexuality with autonomy by being beautiful and cruel like Sally and the women in movies. Esperanza finds out that being beautiful and cruel is impossible in her male-dominated society, and she experiences sexual assault. So, this is going to be probably like one of her main conflicts. Now remember, we are going to be listening to the book, reading the book, or watching videos on summaries and videos of summaries of the book as well. So this is just me making assumptions about what I think this book is going to center around, okay? So I'm not going to use these notes just so I can write the 5-page paper, because this is not enough information. The reason I'm giving you these 30-minute to an hour sections during our week throughout this quarter is so that you can really get to know the book as much as possible, whether you are reading it or not, okay? So the main conflict is, in my opinion, is going to be the sexual assault or harassment. So, what we first did is we looked at the title, we went over the table of contents, we kind of read a little bit about the introduction of the author, we went over our vocabulary, okay? And you guys will obviously write down the definitions that you remember later, but for me, I'm not actually going to read this book. However, it just seemed quite interesting. We have our main character name, kind of a little bit of a bio on her here, and then opened up Spark Notes just to try and get to know the book. I think the summary, there might be a video somewhere, maybe not, but on YouTube there are definitely a lot of folks who dedicate their channels to giving an overview of what the book is about, maybe even some spoilers. So just be careful with that as you look them up. But basically what I want you guys to do is really just go over the brief intro and pull up a summary and really just try and get to know the book as much as possible before you actually start reading, watching, or listening to it. Okay, so this was your tutorial on how to take notes on that and how to approach it.